This is your World War III update. Okay, look, it's not even an emergency update anymore. We are in it. We are in the fire right now. This is it. It's happening all around us, and the temperature is only going to continue to rise. The global economic paradigm is collapsing precipitously. There's no better indicator, of course, than the price of gold. That is they've lost complete control of it at this point. Bonds are exploding. The Japanese carry trade is completely coming undone. Everybody's moving into some sort of economic safe haven as this mercurial president throws the world into a complete whirlwind and disarray, and nobody knows what's going to happen in the next few weeks, much less months or years, or whether or not there's going to be election. I certainly don't think there is going to be. I think they know that the shit is going to hit the fan, and that's why they really don't care anymore, and that's why, of course, they're building themselves a secret Whitehouse bunker to withstand nuclear attack under the new East Wing building. We got so much stuff to talk about today. At the time of making this video, by the time I release this, there might be an attack in progress. It looks like there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of stratotankers, Pegasus, Globemasters, Hercules on the move at the time of making this video. Who knows where they're going to attack, who they're going to attack, but shit is just hitting the fan all around us, and we really need to appreciate the fact that we are in the crucible of collapse at this point in time. And I think that by the time we hit 5,000, they have to throw some other combustible element into that crucible, because every 1,000 increment, it just gets crazier and crazier. There's a new war, or there's a new escalation in civil unrest as we move towards civil war. It really does seem like they're just throwing caution to the wind at this point, and they are just recklessly hurtling towards our inexorable demise. Now, let's just take a look at where do I start with this? Okay, so yeah, we got all these planes that they're flying to Europe, presumably, or the Middle East. We'll talk about the Middle East in a moment. I did want to focus on this story today because it's interesting, even though it's probably just a decoy, if we're being brutally honest. But indeed, Trump is building a secret White House bunker to withstand nuclear attack, and it is going to be under the East Wing. Now, there already was a bunker under there, as you would expect. I mean, it's the White House, for God's sakes. But in making this new, what is it, like a 90,000 square foot, what are they calling it, ballroom or something like that? Well, usually, more often than not, when they do these big civic projects, this is when they build the bunkers under the guise of the big project, and it always goes over budget. I mean, we all know about the Denver airport. It is definitely shrouded in secrecy and conspiracy, and they make a joke about it. You know, they got the talking gargoyles and the New World Order stuff and all the weird murals that they've taken down, because that was really starting to creep people out. But we know full well that there are big bunkers besides Cheyenne Mountain and Raven Rock that likely exist and that they've committed billions and billions of dollars to. And this is just a reminder. Okay, this is mainstream news, by the way. This is not some fringe media element. CNN, New York Times, a lot of conservative publications are talking about it as well. This is fairly common knowledge. But what's interesting is that, as to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's been any real augmentation of the derelict living conditions in American cities. Not that there has been in Canada either. Our cities are complete and utter trash, don't get me wrong, for the most part. But I don't see any high-speed rail going up. You know, I don't see any fallout shelters being built for the common man. No, they're going to build themselves bunkers. Listen, they are going to save themselves, and you are going to be by yourself, okay? The people who are stricken with cognitive dissonance right now because everything the president that they voted for promised them has not come true. In fact, they've delivered the complete opposite. At this point, the only thing that's really been done is the whole Gulf of America. Everything else has been a Faustian bargain, catch-22, something that has been ultimately counterproductive to the economic well-being of the country. And of course, you're still $40 trillion in debt. And so why wouldn't Greenland want to be annexed by a country that's $40 trillion in debt? I mean, of course they should want that, right? Anyway, we'll get to that. Let's talk about this, okay? Let's talk about this, because this is kind of weird. So, yeah, they're building this. Some people are saying, well, they're actually building a data center. It's going to be the command and control. Probably. There's going to be a Skynet component to this. So this is the demolished East Wing, and this is the new ballroom footprint. So it is going to be massive. Now, based on the geology of this region, they can go around 80 feet deep before they encounter problems with the water table, possibly a bit deeper, then they get into bedrock. So not deep enough to withstand a direct nuclear surface blast, which is probably what they would try to throw at the Whitehouse if they were trying to take out command and control. Not that Trump would necessarily be here anyways. They would likely, or at least the secondary government would probably be at Raven Rock. He would be at an undisclosed bunker that we don't even know about, and maybe the Russians know about, but they're not letting on that they know about it. But let's just say he so happens to be caught here. If it's not a direct hit, there is a good chance that you could survive in a bunker that was under 50 feet deep. If it's not a direct hit, I mean, if you're in that blast crater, then you're pretty much screwed. But I would presume that at this point in time, they are using the best technology they can to dig this thing as deep and make it as fortified as possible. There's all kinds of extenuating tunnels that connect different places throughout this. So the problem is that unless you are dead center, and if you have tunnels underneath there that extend outwards in whatever direction underground, unless you have the blueprints, which the Russians may have because they have fairly good human intelligence, then you wouldn't really know. You'd have to just level this place with multiple nukes in order to make sure that you were able to take out the leadership. So anyways, I mean, I find it interesting. There was, I should say, an existing hardened underground complex beneath the East Wing, but I guess it was a little bit archaic and a relic of the past, the Cold War past. Now, in court, the government argued that stopping underground work would endanger national security. So for some reason, there were concerns that Trump was potentially disturbing something of historical significance, which I agree with Trump in this respect. Pragmatically, that's stupid. If you want to build a bunker for the purpose of surviving the end of the world, then you want to make sure that it is modern. This is security modernization at its finest as it pertains to continuity of government. So this is going to be the home, presumably, of the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. And yeah, the command and control aspect of Stratcom, essentially, from the president's point of view anyways, or whoever it is who speaks to the president last. Could you imagine if the president is as fickle as they say, and it's really just about the last person he talks to? It's really going to be about who's in the room with him at the time and whether or not they say, yeah, launch the counterattack, because of the launch on warning. As soon as we get the signal that there's a missile inbound, do you think Trump is going to launch on warning? Probably, if we're being real about it. But it really depends on who's in the room with him at that point in time. So, I guess we should probably be paying attention to who are the people who are around Trump the most, because they're the ones who are going to be deciding as to whether or not we immediately launch on warning and to what extent possible, right? So this is going to contain all of the self-contained life support elements, backup power, backup water, air handling, filtration, And who knows what kind of power source. I presume it's going to be diesel. I doubt they would build a, modular nuclear reactor down there. But I'm sure you could store a lot of diesel. And it's going to have a secure entry sequence. Large steel doors, obviously. Nobody knows what it actually looks like under there except presidents. It is entirely top secret. But based on people who've been there, who have spilled the beans, they did say that there is indeed large steel doors. What's meant by a large steel door is anybody's best guess. We don't know the exact depth, the square footage, the number of rooms, how long it can sustain the occupants, the precise filtration specifications, or the EMP shielding or blast rating specifics. But we can presume that it's probably going to be top notch. And for a building that big, that requires that creates a potential for a very, very large footprint underneath. This will be, presumably, a hardened structure, blast-resistant construction, protected internal compartments. It'll have redundant utilities, robust HVAC systems, and sealed environmental capability appropriate for CBRN hazards, modernized survivable communications that can function under stress and damage. So they're preparing. You probably should too. The government has a strategic reserve for everything, most importantly for themselves. And so at this point in time, it is very imprudent to just believe that your government is going to have a plan for you when the shit hits the fan. The remarkable thing is that the people who criticize the government the most are the most unprepared. You would think that all these people on the left who despise Trump would think to themselves, maybe we should prepare, because it seems like they don't really believe there's going to be another election, because they sure ain't acting like it, despite the fact that the polls are not looking good for Trump and friends. They continue to go full steam ahead. And to me, okay, you could say, well, he's a lame duck president. He knows he's not going to run for a third term. But then there's J.D. Vance. And sure, I mean, we live in a world where most people lack, what do they call it for little babies? Object permanence. Like they don't know that I exist behind here when I pop my head behind there. So they'll just switch out the puppet with another one. And sure, people will probably just forget every bad thing, just like what happened with Trudeau in Canada, right? Trudeau completely destroyed Canada for 10 years, and they simply replaced the face, and we voted for the exact same party, like within a month. How pathetic is that? Anyways, so, I'm kind of depressed, but if you think I'm a party pooper, take a listen to Vucic, all right? Nobody knows what SHDF is going to be like the Serbians. Check out Selko if you don't believe me. Okay, take a listen to this. Talk about a real party pooper. Look at her. She's smiling right now. She ain't going to be smiling much longer. Take a listen to what Vucic has to say. The Serbian president.
Peace, stability, tranquility. There has never been less peace, stability, and tranquility in the world. Last year was the worst year after the Second World War, with number of wars that were launched by different countries or within the countries. And this year is going to be worse than last year. And next year is going to be worse than this year. And everybody is speaking about peace, accusing someone else for not observing something, not paying respect to someone, but at the end, everybody is taking care of its own national interests. Nobody cares about multilateralism, and this is the biggest mistake that all of us made in the past. And now,
okay, cue the brooding, depressed funk music, but let's give a round of applause, because that was one of the most cynical, fatalistic rants, and I, as a prepper, can greatly appreciate his honesty. But let's just listen to that again, okay? This is the president of Serbia now. He tells it like it is.
peace, stability, tranquility. There has never been less peace, stability, and tranquility in the world. Last year was the worst year after the Second World War.
Last year was the worst year. Who is the president? Donald Trump.
With number of wars that were launched by different countries or within the countries. And this year is going to be worse than last year. And next year is going to be worse than this year.
I mean, not to be facetious, but you can only laugh. I mean, what else is there to do at this point? We're prepared. We're ready. We got our guns. We got our ammo. It's just like, just bring it on already. I mean, at this point, he's saying that it was the worst last year. It's going to be worse this year. And next year, it's going to be worse than this year. Wow. Talk about a party pooper. Man. Depressed. I could just hear like the depressed funk music in the back as he talks. My God, is that a bleak outlook? You guys thought I was bad. But he's being real, man, because, I mean, this is it. This is it. This is telling you everything. This is the only, true, quantifiable representation of what's going on that we truly have in this world of deception and skullduggery, and that is the price of metals, because they don't lie. When that starts to really retrace and crash, then we can presume that either they found a way to manipulate the system for a little bit longer and kick the can down the road, or peace has really come, which seems to be a pipe dream at this point. Okay, so yeah, what is this? This is all about the bunker thing. We're just going to go touch and go on stories now. Talked about the government's self-serving survival imperative. Okay, so let's talk about authoritarianism, because there's another component to this, right? While they're hiding in the bunkers, the shit's going to be hitting the fan in the streets. People are going to be going absolutely nuts. And in the same way that the government never gets to the underlying roots of the problem, like instead of the left or the right trying to identify what the real root cause of socioeconomic disparity is, what the real root cause of cultural decline is. No, it's just this scapegoating blame game from one side to another, instead of really trying to address the underlying issues, improving the education system, trying to really give people hope for a brighter future. No, we just either deal with it where the left is way too tolerant, so you get just a bunch of the weirdest, craziest eccentricities that are characteristic of empires in decline, or you get this hardline fetishizing of authoritarian jackboot thuggery that we're seeing on the right now, which is really just a reactionary incels who can't get a girlfriend, so they like to watch people get their ass kicked by the police. It's a whole dominatrix psychosexual thing. But anyways, I digress. So where am I going with this? There's a few stories here. Okay, so there's a story of cops apparently going to door, not just in the UK. This is in Miami. This guy is going to the house of somebody who made a bad post on Facebook, and just a sign of the surveillance state. We have military models in Canada creating hypothetical invasion models from America. And we're going to talk about how that relates to the gun confiscation and this civilian defense force that they want to create of 300,000. We're going to talk about how that relates to the Ukraine forced conscription thing and how that pertains to this guy who is Bovino character, who is really trying to cosplay the Nazi thing to the utmost extent possible. He reminds me of some kind of cross between the closeted gay dad on American Beauty, who worships the Nazi memorabilia, and maybe like a little tinge of that Shawshank Redemption warden. But anyway, we'll talk about Bovino in just a little minute here, because what he's doing right now it's all an act, right? It's with the intention of trying to provoke people into taking some sort of extremely aggressive action. They have agent provocateurs on the ground. They want to incite riots to justify the Insurrection Act, which will, of course, allow them to justify the deployment of the military into the streets of Minnesota, which very well could end in some sort of armed clash between the people of Minnesota and the army. And that's exactly what they want because, once again, going back to this, they need to have some sort of militaristic component to police the streets when they come out of their bunkers after the dust settles. Now, let's just take a look at this, okay? So this apparently, I mean, this is unbelievable, all right? If you think it's bad in the UK, I mean, I thought this was pretty extreme. They're starting to go to people's houses now based on Facebook posts, which, from what I can gather, this wasn't a particularly offensive post. It wasn't like the person was trying to, yell fire in a crowded theater type thing. It wasn't like they were making direct threats against somebody. But, you be the judge here. So let's play a little bit of this clip. I don't want to play the whole thing.
Sure.
Okay.
Is that your account?
I refuse to answer questions without...
Okay, for starters, one of the cop is in her house. I would never let that cop in my house, especially if they didn't have a warrant. They wouldn't be setting foot in the house. Mind you, this might be some kind of apartment building.
My lawyer present, so I really don't know how to answer that question either.
Well,
way.
like I said, you're not
this
going to
is
jail.
freedom of speech. This is America, right? And
I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
We're just trying to see if it's you, because if we're not talking to the right person, we want to go see who the right person is.
Okay, how can I help you?
So pretty much it's just a statement that was made as far as,
They always send a really big dude, right? And they don't do that for no reason. They're trying to send a message there. It's an intimidation tactic to get you to not say things. And I think they even want people to upload these videos because it doesn't make sense for them to go door to door. Like, it's not an efficient use of resources. They want people to broadcast these videos, so that's how they get the message out there. You know what I'm saying? They don't have the resources to do this kind of shit.
Verbatim, it says the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings and refuses to stand up for the LGBTQ community in any way. Even leaves the room when they vote and on related matters.
Okay, so the post was like your typical, leftist, pro-Palestinian, LGBTQ, whatever, post. Okay? Fine. There was no death threat. They were trying to say that somebody could read that and that could lead to some stochastic terrorism, in that it could trigger somebody to maybe possibly go out and do something stupid. Now, if that's not a stretch, I don't know what is. But that is pretty crazy when you think about it, right? So eventually, this will all bite us in the ass. What I worry about most right now, in the movie Civil War, when they take down the president? Look, I mean, life imitates art, and or art imitates life, no matter how you slice it, vice versa. I think that could possibly happen come 2028. What I fear the most, because I'm always thinking in the future, I fear the retaliation from the left. I have stated that that's how the Civil War is likely going to start. If there is another election and the left gets put into the cockpit for this whole show, which is what it is, then they'll have the firepower. And of course, you'll have the good old boys on the other side that will actually make for a fair fight. Because right now, I mean, these people running around the streets, most of them are too young. They don't own body armor. They don't have, plate carriers and bulletproof helmets and, all of the fancy tactical gear, right, to fight a civil war. There's a few of them who, are starting to, familiarize themselves with firearms, but it would be a very quick fight. It would just more or less look like more forms of terroristic attacks like the Tyler Robinson, assassination attempts and things of that nature, which is bad. And it is actually more difficult and more challenging because how do you fight that? You can't really fight that. The only way you can fight it is by conferring more authoritarian capabilities onto the state. And, people will say, well, why is it that the left riots and the right doesn't riot? It's because typically the left, when they're rioting against something, it's because it's some sort of state-sponsored violence. It's either the police or it's the military. I'm not saying that it's always justified. It's never really a good idea to burn your city down, right? But typically, when it's the other side of the coin, it's always some, rogue person who's off their meds and, really radicalized by, that happens on both sides, but we're talking about, it's very seldom that state-sponsored violence, at least in the United States, aligns with the interests of the left. So you're never going to see, it might periodically, it used to be that the right was, in many ways, anti-Fed, federal agents storming in and, the whole Waco thing and all that, right? But of course, people forget. And right now, it's simply a lot of cognitive dissonance. People don't want to admit that instead of just admitting, okay, this guy is not doing anything he promised for us, with the exception of locking up some Somalians, which might be sufficient for you, maybe. Instead of just admitting that he basically has not fulfilled any of his promises, they'll just keep going with it because they're too afraid to admit that, well, we were wrong. And there's no shame in that, right? There's no, Trump, it's more entertaining. Do I think it would have been better under Kamala? Would we? It's hard to say where we would have been because it's all deep state that would control that person. So it depends on what their plan would be. I probably think we would be more or less the same place as we are now, if we're being brutally honest, because a lot of this stuff that Trump has said he's going to do, the tariffs, what happened to that? A lot of it is just taco. And so with the exception of changing the names of certain places and rattling the hornet's nest, not much has changed. Anyways, this Bovino character, again, this is strictly for the purpose of trying to antagonize people, right? Because they know that all of this Nazi symbolism and insignia and the Sam Brown suspenders, like the brown shirt sort of references, and the SS trench coat and all that stuff, they know that that is going to conjure up feelings of concern in the left, obviously. They're calling people fascists, so they're starting to emulate that. And I don't actually think this guy believes these things per se. I think a lot of this is just... It's just them trolling in a way. At least that's what I would hope it is. Maybe it is worse. Again, I think a lot of what is fanning this whole Fuentes thing is a bunch of people who don't know how to talk to girls. And that was best exemplified. I'm not sure if you guys caught the video of Fuentes and Sneeko and all those guys at the club singing Ye's Hail Hitler. And half of them are multiracial like me, which is kind of hilarious in a very sad way. But, a lot of that, you could see that, there's a girl in that video who is tapping him on the shoulder. And some people say that he's in the closet. Maybe that is, that's his choice, whatever. But I think a lot of this rage is simply because you have an entire nation of people who don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to socialize. And I think they are frustrated. And people need a scapegoat when shit starts to hit the fan. So it's much easier, instead of saying, hey, you got to fix yourself, to point the finger at everything else that is rightly screwed up in society. There's no doubt about that. there is a lot of problems in the black community. I mean, I've been meaning to do a video on the subject of race because I think as a biracial person, I can bring a very unique and remedial perspective to that. But it's one of those things that, people will say, you shouldn't do it. And I would normally agree with you. But I think it's getting to the point where this perspective that I have is going to be needed. And I will do that video soon. But it's one of those things I've been meditating on. Anyways, this is what they're going to do. Okay, so what you're seeing right now, what you need to understand right now is that's going to be this. Okay, I can't really show you the clip, but I showed you part of the clip. Okay, so it's a Ukrainian guy. This happens 100 times a day, probably 1,000 times a day across Ukraine. They just randomly scoop people up off the streets. People are accustomed to seeing it now. People do fight back. And the difference is between these guys and these guys. And this is what's so scary. The difference is these guys are fully loaded. Okay. And yesterday I made the reference to the Nicole Good shooting, and I made the comparison of a situation in Russia. I don't have the video to show you, but there was a car that was being pulled over by police. The car backed up, nearly ran over two police, far more hostile and aggressive than the Nicole Good situation. And did the police unload on the guy? No, they shot the tires of the car. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best thing to do, but I've told you guys my perspective on the dangers of the militarization of police. If you look at a cop from the 1970s, they had a pistol on their holster. They weren't all tacked out, okay? They didn't look like RoboCop. And we actually had far more gun rights and guns here in Canada then. So why is it now that the cops are fully loaded here and they're taking all our guns away? If you ask me, and this is going to be the tragic irony of it, those guns that they confiscate come October, I would not be surprised. And how tragically poetic would it be that if you were rounded up into a camp with your own gun by somebody else who joined the civilian task force? Wouldn't that be ironic? I want to make that into some kind of like animation. Maybe don't base it in Canada, but, it could be something like communist China or something like that. Could be historical. So, yeah, this is going to happen here. They get people used to it. Now, the people fight back because these guys are not armed with guns. I think some of them might have some less than lethal weapons, and sometimes they're accompanied by the police who do carry weapons, but more often than not, they're just by themselves. And they are just physically accosting people, stuffing them into a vehicle, unmarked cars, exactly the same as this. But when these guys do it, it's going to be with guns. So when they come at you with the compulsory service demands, and they've conditioned people to have this fetish for authority on the right, even though those are the people who historically have fought against this bullshit, don't be surprised when they're not picking up immigrants, they're picking up your ass to send you to the front line. And if you have children, you need to watch, but not just children, because remember, they just raised the age of conscription to 65 in, what was it, Sweden, I think? One of those countries. They raised it from 55 to 65, okay? And in Norway, they just send out those 13,000 letters that I talked about yesterday that are basically saying, yeah, there's a war coming and we're going to have to confiscate your stuff. What I've been telling you guys for the longest time. Now, if I'm the Canadian government and I'm trying to be Switzerland about all this, you would think if there was any truth to this threat of American annexation of Canada, they would want the population to be more armed. So, because they would want to, realistically, if you armed every Canadian, is it possible that the Americans could still invade? Yeah, they probably could. And it wouldn't be that hard to do the, spec ops thing with the, high energy, millimeter wave weapons on the Parliament building. They could probably do that lickety-split, if we're being real. But, if you had 20 million Canadians hiding behind every blade of grass, that could potentially be a Vietnam situation, even though we're very spread out. So it would be, that's the problem. It's not like concentrated, so you could easily take it piece by piece. So we're probably screwed either way. But if you were the Canadian government and you wanted to resist a potential hostile takeover by another nation, you would think you'd want an armed populace for that. So a lot of people are probably going to be willing to forswear their freedom in the sense of their ability to not be sent off to war for the sake of getting guns. And this is what people are saying right now. Well, let us keep our guns and we'll become a part of the militia, right? But have you thought that through? Because what that means is that, and maybe they'll dangle that carrot, okay? Maybe they're going to say, you want your guns? Well, we have this program where you can sign up and you can keep your guns and we'll train you. But let's just say World War III comes, we're going to have to send your ass over to Russia or China or wherever else. I have a sneaking suspicion maybe they might float that idea at some point. Or they just need guns to give to all the people who hate guns and don't know how to use them, who are a part of this bureaucratic apparatus. And they're going to take all the guns from law-abiding owners that they confiscate this year and give those to the other side to police us when shit hits the fan. Wouldn't that be crazy? We all just prepared for the government. Oh boy, find a place deep, deep in the woods, folks, because that's your only hope in hell of survival at this point in time. Yep, we're fucked. 110%. Okay, so that's the whole police state rant for the day. I think I covered everything. Did I? Yeah. Okay, so let's try to dissect the whole Greenland thing. Okay, yeah, people have wanted me to talk about the Mark Carney China thing. I think at this point, they're doing it for leverage. I think at the end of the day, we would much rather trade with the United States. I wish I could have sent products down to the United States for the last year, but unfortunately I couldn't. And a lot of that is because of the decisions by the current administration and the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, who decided to start a trade war with the biggest trading partner. Probably not a good idea. So I think what Carney is doing this is leverage at this point in time. This is something that could be undone. And I can't stand Carney as far as I can throw him. But I must say this is probably what I would do too, because what else can you do? When Trump is throwing his weight around, the only thing a bully responds to is really when you push him back. And so he said a lot of things at this speech, even though it's at the World Economic Forum in Davos, that's gained a lot of notoriety, and rightly so. The whole you'll own nothing and be happy people, or you'll own nothing and be sad and depressed and look like Alexander Vucic every day. Yeah, that's where he's given that speech. And I believe the speech was boycotted by the United States. They were off having a meeting between Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Kirill Dmitriev of Russia, talking about, how they're going to continue to separate assets and disentangle entirely and make sure that the oligarchs on both sides get theirs before they send the pawns into war with one another. What is this here? So at what point are we going to realize, okay, so Trump retweeted, Isn't it funny? Still, X is what, in its third or fourth year, and we still don't have a substitute word for tweeting? Xing? Nobody wants to say Xing. So at what point are we going to realize the enemy is within? China and Russia are the boogeymen when the real threat is the UN, NATO, and this religion. I put religion in quotes because it's not a religion, it's a cult. Yeah, I went there. I don't know who the hell Bobby D is, nor do I care. Trump is talking about the peace panel or some bullshit like that as a substitute to the UN. Part of the reason why the UN hasn't been effective is because, let's face it, the US doesn't respect the UN or listen to the UN. The US typically unilaterally does first and then asks for forgiveness later and doesn't really care if you forgive them. So the reason why the UN doesn't work, the reason why the International Criminal Court doesn't work, is because the US isn't signatory to those things. But anyways, it doesn't really matter anymore. Shit's hitting the fan. The world's ending. Might as well just have fun. Okay, what is this? Shockingly, our brilliant NATO ally, the United Kingdom, is currently planning to give away the island of Diego Garcia, the site of a vital U.S. military base, which I don't think is going to change the status of the military base. I think they're still going to be able to operate there. And if they don't, then the U.S. will just take it to Mauritius, and to do so for no reason whatsoever, in all caps. Because for Trump, I said it beforehand, Harris was the party of globalism. Trump is the party of rampant jingoism, where it's just this excessive patriotic interventionism into countries that are mostly defenseless. There is no doubt that China and Russia have noticed this act of total weakness. Again, it's all about China and Russia, and this is what you need to realize. People think, Trump is cozying up to the Russians and he likes China and Russia. No, they're always going to be the biggest enemies. And in many ways, I kind of agree with Trump. If this was done for some woke reason, then I kind of understand where he's coming from here, because you already own it. Giving it back is going to be purely symbolic. These are international powers who only recognize strength, which is why the United States of America, under my leadership, is now, after only 1 year, respected like never before. We need the John Travolta Pulp Fiction meme. Respected by who? Who? In what world? I tell you, that speech by Carney today might have started something. The UK giving away extremely important land is an act of great stupidity and is another in a very long line of national security reasons why Greenland has to be acquired. So I think what he's saying here, he's worried that, okay, if the UK pulls away, maybe China or Russia steps in, which is unlikely considering it's a small island and the US has one of the biggest military bases on it. Denmark and its European allies have to do the right thing. Thank you for your attention to this matter, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Will the U.S. acquire part of Greenland in 2026? Polymarket says there's a 25% chance. I think this entire thing is theater. It's all a ruse. It's military stratagem to the max. It boils down to this. This is really it. It has nothing to do with rare earth metals, which they could easily get from Canada, and they're not going to be able to profit off of that for decades. Okay, the actual return on the initial investment, it is going to cost the taxpayer. Looks like I'm getting a message here. It looks like shit's going to hit the fan right away, probably by the time I'm making this video. Anyways, they are... they're just getting ready. They want to put nukes up there. They can do that anyways. Is this just an ego play? Is this whole thing, just like as I've said for many weeks now, it's just a fake war as a cover for a real one, because they do want to launch their own bolt out of the blue attack on Russia. And if you can surround Russia, if you can attack them from Greenland and from Europe, in which they're completely surrounded, Russia is surrounded. Armenia, Azerbaijan, if they do take Iran, then they have them in the Caspian Sea. Syria fell, Turkey, they've got them enclosed in the Baltic and the Black Sea. And now, if you really start heavily militarizing Greenland, again, when I say a fake war, you see all the troops flowing in there. Now, there's not many, okay? But this is, what do you call it? A force that kind of prepares the groundwork for a broader force. This is definitely testing the waters of something, and it arguably is a way that they can surreptitiously put troops there, and they can make it seem like it's because, we're worried about the United States, but I think the Russians aren't falling for this. I mean, Putin is being very phlegmatic about the whole thing because they don't seem to care if the United States moves into that region or not. I don't think it would necessarily change much, but let's also remember that the New START Treaty is about to expire, okay? And while it is just a formality at this point and likely not being honored by either side, everybody's going full steam ahead. We should presume that there is a distinct possibility that they would put nuclear weapons here. Now, they have nuclear submarines, but there's also the question of interceptors, sensors, and the space-based command and control aspect of this, which could potentially give the West a very one-sided advantage if there ever was a full-blown nuclear war. So this is what it's all about. It has nothing to do with the rare earth minerals and none of that bullshit. Okay? This has everything. And the Russians and the Chinese, they don't want this. They don't have, they got their, I mean, the Russians have so much land that they probably haven't even surveyed for stuff. They have no interest in going into Greenland and investing tons of money they don't have for decades. Maybe, to strip mine this place and end up pissing off all the natives and have to deal with some, uprising on the island or something like that. It's just not worth it at this point in time. There's a massive ice sheet, which is melting. But, so that's what's going on there. So this guy here, he told Donald Trump to F off.
Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, F off.
This is a Danish MP, apparently, who's really taken this way too seriously, if you ask me.
This kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, F off.
If the translation was correct, the term you used is not allowed in this house, and there will be consequences to the message you have used. It is not okay in this house of democracy.
I mean, really, bro, they're threatening to invade your country. Who gives a fuck at this point, right? Now, again, I think this is just Trump being Trump, trolling at this point, right? You got Rubio and Vance behind him here. There was another picture they put of Canada. Yeah, I mean, at this point, whatever. It's like we're going to be tyrannized by fascists or communists. Take your pick. It's an interesting post by Fadux Network. Typically more or less a reliable source, even though they're really pushing for an Iranian war lately. Denmark's foreign minister, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, says the fist bump he got from Denmark's U.S. ambassador after Wednesday's meeting with the U.S. Vice President and Secretary of State was a fist of relief. Some weird sexual reference there, possibly. Interestingly, Scott Bessent did say, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, just wait, Trump's going to make an announcement, don't worry, don't overreact, which makes me think that this is all just a bunch of BS. Okay? And is this about Trump's legacy, like some people are saying? I don't know. France sent a bunch of troops up there. This is a French military plane, apparently. People don't realize, okay, it's one thing to say, yeah, Greenland's ours. You're never, ever, ever going to want to go there. And once you get there, you're going to be like, shit, take me back. That place is cold as balls. And yeah, you're not going to want to be at Greenland. That's why everybody's like, yay, we get more stuff. It's not really going to help the average person in America. And if you're in Greenland, like these people here who are making fun of the fentanyl addicts in the United States, in Greenland, this is the new thing. Do you really want to be conquered by a nation that's $40 trillion in debt? Understanding full well that that means that you inherit a proportion of that debt. So immediately they are indebted, a couple $100,000 that they weren't before, and maybe they have their health care taken away. Now, it'll probably be some territorial arrangement similar to Puerto Rico where they have their own sort of independent government to a certain extent, but they're still a part of the United States. So they'll be able to keep, what they have existing bureaucracy there. But I can understand why there is a reluctance to want to join. And I could understand also how there's probably a lot of money being thrown at protest, even though Trump could sweeten the deal and say, hey, we'll give you all $50,000. And then some of them might think, even though there is a culture that claims to be anti-materialistic because they're, Inuit based, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's a culture which doesn't tend to value the things that we here in capitalist America tend to value. So that might not work on them. It might not work on the Na'vi. This is really turning into an Avatar situation. And we're on the wrong side of the play. So, shit's going to hit the fan. They're sending a lot of equipment into the Middle East right now. The United States Air Force cargo flights have maintained a steady route moving supplies between Germany, the United Kingdom, and Jordan over the past 2 days, including refueling tankers and F-15s, which are a long-range strike platform. And I believe Israel just got more deliveries of F-35s, so they're up to 43 F-35s. So once this aircraft carrier gets there, you're going to have that, you're going to have what they have in Jordan, and you're going to have what they have in Israel and whatever is left in the other surrounding military bases. Plus, they'll bring in the stealth bombers. Now, they're saying a lot of nothing in the media. Oh, Trump is looking for a plan that is decisive. At this point, again, and I'll reiterate, if Iran does not show that they have a nuclear capability, then it is just going to be open season. And they will be systematically picked apart slowly but surely mostly because of the sanctions and the seizure of oil tankers and vessels, which continues to be ongoing. There was another one that the U.S. took over today. This is a video of that. This is the 7th tanker. I believe this one is in and around the Venezuela region. But there's always multiple hands in the pot here, be it an Iranian-flagged, Russian-owned tanker with Venezuelan oil that's being shipped to China, that sort of thing. So it affects everybody. And I think that's what the Iranians are worried about, a bit of an embargo. I think oil, it looks like the lid is about to come off that one. And I would say that it's, when this U.S. government vessel, which is the Abraham Lincoln, I do believe, which is about a few days away, 72 hours or so away from the Arabian Sea. Once that gets there, all the assets are essentially in place, and that's when they're going to try something. Apparently, a coup in Iran is unlikely because, again, I'm not going to belabor that point, but the tentacles of the Ayatollahs run deep. That's the Abe Lincoln. We had some Black Hawks flying around the Iraqi. This is kind of deceiving. They say this is the Iranian border, this is Iraq, but this is probably, a couple hundred miles. This is a new kind of camo that they're using in Russia. It's anti-infrared, and I'm not sure if it's, I don't know how well that would dissipate a heat signature, but it's it's intended to look like rubble in a city, it just makes perfect sense. And all this camo bullshit, let's just talk about that, how dumb this is, right? Like, who are you hiding from? It's gotten to the point where the National Guard, to distinguish themselves in Minnesota, is wearing high vis, which totally negates the point of wearing camo that isn't effective in an urban environment anyways. I mean, they're using the multicam, which is supposed to be, a little bit of everything, but it doesn't work. It's stupid. It's pointless. And the Russians are realizing that. So I got to say, this is kind of nifty, man. If it actually does work against thermals to a certain degree, then, which it's really hard to defeat thermal. Really, really hard. You can do it for a while, but that heat signature is eventually going to show. But pretty interesting. You could just get that from local craft shop, to make something like that. That is actually really cool, man. Because, if you're a drone flying over, it would be very hard to tell. I mean, these guys are getting pretty good, and the drone tech camera, I'm sure it's pretty high resolution, but it would be hard to tell. Kind of like PETA in the Hunger Games. This is Scott Besant.
Look, Maria, no more Venezuelan oil for them. China is a very large buyer of Russian oil, as they are of Iranian oil, as they were of Venezuelan oil. But guess what, Maria? No more Venezuelan oil for them. China.
He says it with just smug, supercilious condescension. The thing that they must understand, because they understand macroeconomics, oil is globally, the price is globally set. There's some variation, between the different types of oil, $5 more or less. But no, if you're taking Venezuela's oil, then that doesn't necessarily take oil off the market. It just sort of displaces it. So it displaces the supply. But all that means is that you buy less oil from other places, and that oil becomes cheaper and more accessible to the Chinese. So it's kind of a zero-sum game, unless they're just hoarding it for their own strategic reserve, which may well be the case. But yeah, this whole thing is not long for this world. Lots of big explosions inside Russia, ammo depots, secondaries, the whole 9 yards. Shit's still hitting the fan there. We just don't talk about it. We will soon. This was an interesting day, because it's not often that you see this. This is how things should be, right? This is how things right themselves. This is the universe balancing itself out. The fake stock market down, all the commodities up. Danish pension funds apparently divesting from U.S. treasuries. So this is the big elephant in the room also, is that the Europeans hold $8 trillion in U.S. treasuries, plus foreign investment in the stock market is arguably what has propped it up for so long. So if people start to divest from the stock market because, in part, this bullshit and instability, and people actually worried about the integrity of the Whitehouse as to whether or not it can weather the coming storm of civil unrest, then yeah, people are going to be freaking out, and they're going to be divesting, and they're going to be just looking for, where do we go? We go to gold. So, I mean, at this point, man, gold could hit 10,000. And I mean, in a near term, if countries really start buying, if Canada starts buying gold again, or hoarding gold that we mine, I mean, anything is possible. And I remind people, there's only 45,000 tons of gold left in known reserves that is harvestable by conventional methods. Beyond that, it's going to cost a lot more to mine an ounce of gold. And this is something people never talk about. They just presume it's endless. The gold mining has plateaued 3,000 tons a year for the last however long. And so that's only going to either continue to diminish because it's going to become more and more inaccessible, And so it's not rocket science. They're saying 10 years and the gold's going to run out. So gold could go to 100,000 an ounce. And I don't think that's crazy. I mean, when you look at hyperinflationary markets historically, I mean, look what happened in the Weimar Republic. So these money numbers become irrelevant at the end game of an empire's currency. So I think it might just get to the point where we stop measuring it in US dollars, and that's when you'll know we're in a whole new paradigm. When we stop measuring gold in dollars, that's when you know that the US dollar is no longer king. Japanese bonds are absolutely exploding, which means that the carry trade is completely coming undone. I believe the 10-year was up to like 2.4%. So the whole globalized financial system is coming apart. We also had one of the biggest Earth-facing solar flares yesterday, and they're saying that it was almost a Carrington-level event. The radiation was so bad that the astronauts had to take shelter, apparently, and you can see it here. So this is this is not AI. This is a real video clip, okay? So this is the geomagnetic storm that took place last night. Remember, one of those suckers, and the whole thing could go tits up. Take a look at that. Take a look at that. I'll be damned. It's a good time to be a prepper. The preppers were right. We were right. We are vindicated. Now, prepare for the suck, and not the good kind. Thanks for watching.